welcome to my channel. I am super excited for this video. I've been excited about it for a while. Technically, this is going to be my channel's Halloween video, so if that's what you're looking for, congratulations, you have found it. And we are examining the question, are spiders good or evil? A great question to ask, and although most people will logically agree with me, they're probably amoral, Joe, it doesn't matter. Instinctively, most people in the world think that spiders are evil and they all should be squashed and run away from. Now, I'm excited today because you don't just get to sit here and listen to me talk about this. You actually get to hear some professionals talk about tarantulas and spiders in general, and I am a tarantula keeper. I'm a pastor who keeps tarantulas. My wife really doesn't love tarantulas, so I actually keep them in my church office. I don't know how many pastors you know with tarantulas in their church offices. I'm not trying to be weird or unique, but I find them to be the perfect office buddies. So we're going to talk about those. I'm going to show you some pictures of my tarantulas. It's going to be great. And I had some people that I was excited to collaborate with. Richard from the Tarantula Collective was unable to do it with me. Something about how my beard made his look bad. I don't know. Sorry, Richard. We miss you. Wish you could be here. Tarantula Cat, I wanted her to collab with me. However, she only collabs with people who sit on the floor while they make their video. So, neither of those guys are here today, but I have two great people. Number one, I have Dr. Everhard, who's a Presbyterian pastor. He has his doctoral degrees in church history, specifically Jonathan Edwards, which is a church father theologian who is all about spiders. And then I also have Patricia from Tarantula Heaven, who is by day a therapist. And I love her, and she's great, and she's going to talk to you about this too. So first of all, as we look at this question, are spiders inherently good or evil? I would like to start off with Patricia from Tarantula Heaven telling us a little bit about the psychology and what happens and why we automatically have a reaction when it comes to tarantula. Patricia, talk to us.
What's up, guys? It's Patricia from tarantulaheaven.com and the Tarantula Heaven YouTube channel. I've been in tarantula keeping 8 years, maybe a little bit more. And this is Spidey, my Grandmazilla rosea. She is currently my only tarantula. And she is the one who started my love for tarantulas, even though I was always kind of interested in spiders, even as a little kid. But I can really relate to the fear that people have about spiders and creepy crawlies. And so I wanted to just spend a few minutes talking about that. And I can also add in a little bit of my clinical experience because I am also a therapist by trade. And so I know a little bit about phobias and just stigma and how these fears can really be debilitating for us. So I mentioned that I had a deep curiosity for tarantulas and I really was interested by them and loved them. But I would say I also had a pretty healthy dose of fear too. And those of us, many of us will actually find that we're very interested in things that we're terrified of. For example, lots of people love Shark Week, but they are terrified to go into the ocean where they can't see the bottom, or they're afraid to go into the water in general, or to go swimming in deep waters. And fear can be a really healthy thing. It's something that protects us. I will say that for arachnophobia, or like just any fear or squeamishness around spiders or bugs, can be really challenging because you can do things to kind of control not getting eaten by a shark, right? So for example, you cannot go in the water, you cannot go, out into the ocean. There are certain things that you can control. I would say that with insects and spiders, it's a little bit harder. Even when we feel like we can't have any spiders in sight, spiders are a fact of our lives, whether we're living in the woods, whether we're living in a city. If you have a basement, you have spiders in your house. If you have any type of house, you have spiders in your house or in your backyard. And so I want to just validate that arachnophobia can be incredibly difficult and stressful. And I will say that in my own experience, one thing that truly helped me get over my own fears of spiders was to actually learn way more about them. And this is what I also see, not only in my clinical practice with people who have certain phobias, but also for many other tarantula owners. My interest in spiders just started with me educating myself about them and learning more. And the more I got to understand these creatures, the less scary they were. And even though I was a teeny bit scared when I bought Spidey, she was pretty much the same size she is now, and I felt like that was way more than I could handle. She was so big, but she was also like the healthiest looking spider the pet store had. So I bought her and I was super intimidated by her, but I've grown to really observe her patterns and her behavior. And if you look at my Tumblr blog, which I'll leave the link to, you will see that she does all sorts of silly stuff. She is not actually that scary at all. And that's what I hear from people who have either stumbled upon my work or heard stories about Spidey, that the more that they see the other side to these creatures and like the behind the scenes of what these creatures are actually like versus what they've been told these creatures are like, they actually start to really just kind of melt. And I get messages all the time from people who have said that they're trying to get over their fear of spiders, and looking at my blog or hearing about my spider has really, really helped them. What they have been finding is that inviting the thought of spiders into your subconscious by either like intermittently absorbing info about them, exposing yourself to an image here and there very, very quickly, can kind of gently deactivate our fear responses. It's not going to cause you to shut down and be frozen in fear. It's actually going to be a much more gentle way to allow your nervous system and your brain to get accustomed to it and actually be actively learning about spiders and tarantulas in the process. Some people find that for them, the very best way to get over a fear of spiders is to actually get one, and at least you can control that it's in its cage and you don't have to take it out, you don't have to hold it, you don't have to touch it. I don't touch my tarantula, and that is a very wonderful way to get accustomed to them and observe them from a comfortable proximity where you are safe and so is the spider. However, some people find that just by learning and educating themselves about it, watching YouTube videos about tarantulas or silly forums or pictures, take control of this fear. Because whether you actually get into the tarantula hobby, or if you just want to be more comfortable when you're going camping around insects or arachnids, getting over your fear of little critters and spiders can really benefit you. I imagine that if you have a really intense form of arachnophobia, that it's truly controlling you and really perhaps preventing you from living your life. And so these little mini measured exposures or educational sessions that you're giving yourself can really, really be helpful, just to not only help you learn something new, which is exciting and perhaps fascinating, but to also just desensitize you to the threat and what you believe about the threat. Because I am telling you, I've had this one for so many years, and I know that every tarantula is different, but she has brought so much joy to my life. She is the exact opposite of what I thought a tarantula would be. She is very sweet. She is just a joy. Really just be conscious about what others have told you about spiders and what the media has told you about spiders and just all that fear mongering, because you might find that your experience with a spider is just so much different. Well, oftentimes our fears can really only be changed by becoming replaced with curiosity and respect. And that's what I hear from a lot of people, and that is what I've experienced myself. I am so glad that Joseph asked me to be a part of this conversation about stigma and fear surrounding spiders and tarantulas. I truly hope this was helpful for you.
I really appreciate her perspective. That is a wonderful person with a great channel. You should please go check her channel out. I'm going to put a link to that in the description of this video. And I agree with her. I think she's absolutely on the right point when it comes to how we interact with spiders and what we need to work on ourselves. I love my spiders. In fact, I'm going to tell you about my spiders. Number one, I have this little guy named Moses. He's my biggest one right now. And Moses is great because I call him Moses because I pulled him out of Egypt, aka Petco, who does not keep tarantulas well. In fact, if you are buying tarantulas, buy online. There are much better places to buy than in the pet stores because they don't treat their tarantulas very well. So I rescued Moses one day, brought him out of Egypt as it were, and now he's my office buddy. I also have Anne Locke, who I'm hoping is a female tarantula. She is named after the premier female theologian of the Protestant Reformation. So I just love all things Reformation, and as she grows, I'm excited to have her grow into the developing reformer that I know she is. I also have Mrs. Edwards. Mrs. Edwards is a golden blue-legged baboon tarantula, and Mrs. Edwards is named after the wife of Jonathan Edwards, but I don't get to tell you about that. Remember I said I had an expert. I'm going to ask Dr. Everhard to tell us about Jonathan Edwards, a famous figure in church history and theologian, best known, my favorite book by him is Charity and Its Fruits. If you're a Christian and you have not read Charity and Its Fruits by Jonathan Edwards, you got to get on that. It's phenomenal. Dr. Everhard, why don't you tell us a little bit about Jonathan Edwards and spiders?
All right, so we got Jonathan Edwards, 1703 to 1758. You probably know Jonathan Edwards as one of the primary theologians of the Great Awakening, one of the greatest revivals, at least, well, probably the greatest revival that's ever taken place in this nation. I'm speaking to you from the United States of America here. 1740 to 1742, God poured out an amazing revival across the colonies, and Jonathan Edwards, as well as George Whitefield, was right at the heart of these events. And Edwards preached a very famous sermon that you probably already know called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, where he describes spiders, or at least a spider, as the subject of God's wrath. And in one of his famous lines, he warns sinners that God may treat you like this despicable creature. Listen to this line from Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. That God holds you over the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over a fire, abhors you and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire. He looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into the fire. He is of purer eyes than to bear to have you in his sight. You are 10,000 times so abominable in his eyes as the most hateful, venomous serpent is in ours. And so from that perspective, it certainly sounds like Edwards hates spiders and has an icky disregard for our arachnid friends. Well, actually, he says a few things that are a little bit more positive about spiders. For instance, I don't know if you know this, but one of the first things that Jonathan Edwards ever wrote when he was just a teenager was called The Spider Letter, or his tiny little treatise on the unusual habits of the woodland spider. Now here, Jonathan, as a teenager, he submitted a scientific paper that he had written, hoping to get it published in London's Royal Society, which was headed up by none other than Sir Isaac Newton. Can you believe that? And the teenager, Jonathan Edwards, he spent time out in the woods, just observing the spiders. How do they work? What do they do? What are their motions? What are their mechanisms? How do they spin their webs? And so Edwards drew a bunch of little sketches and he described how they work. And one of the things that curiosified Jonathan Edwards is that the woodland spiders will sometimes emit a string of web from their abdomen and use it to actually fly off, carried up in the breeze, to another location. And sometimes they'll use that technique to get their web from one place to the other. If you've ever walked through a spider web in the woods and wondered how in the world did the spider ever connect from here to there, well, that's how they do it. And Edwards wrote a very vivid description of that, and he sent it off with the hope of having that published. One of the things that's very interesting in this spider letter, or his tiny little treatise on the woodland spider, is how much he seems to admire the spider as a creature of God. In fact, he says in one place that as they spin their webs, they seem to be doing so with the abundance of pleasure. And here Edwards describes the spider not so much as an icky creature to be squished by one's boot, but one that in some ways actually extols the glories of God's creative wonder. Now, Edwards will constantly do this with aspects of creation or nature itself. He'll constantly be looking for creatures or various natural phenomenon, and he will see these as pictures or windows into the divine world. Jonathan Edwards has an entire book called Images or Shadows of Divine Things, where he takes common everyday occurrences, the rooster crowing, or the difficulty of climbing a hill, or the way flowers bloom, virtually anything he saw out in the colonial wilderness or across the countryside, and he would interpret these as spiritual windows into the truths of the eternal world that's all around us. The way God has made this natural order, as Calvin says, is a theater to extol God's glories, in which God's glories can be seen through these natural phenomenon. And interestingly, the spider comes up again several more times for Jonathan Edwards. Images 11, 127, and 160. You can look these up in the works of Jonathan Edwards in his volume on typology. And Edwards, again, though, unfortunately sees spiders in kind of a negative light. In image number 11, for instance, he says this: "The serpents charming of birds and other animals in their mouths, and the spiders taking of the fly in his snare, are lively representations of the devil's catching our souls by his temptations." And so here Edwards kind of takes on a negative perspective on the spider, doesn't he? Because what he's saying here is just as a spider lies in wait to capture its prey, so also the devil and the temptations of our flesh and the world around us are waiting to take us into captivity as well.
So there you have it. Just because you get the heebie-jeebies when it comes down to spiders and tarantulas does not mean that they are inherently evil. In fact, I would say they are good because they are God's creation, and they point us to a great creator who has an incredible design. In fact, in my thumbnail, I use this 4D anatomy model of a tarantula, which I've used to show my kids how it all works. This thing is fantastic. You can buy them on Amazon, but it shows you how complex they are. Tarantulas are wonderful. They point us to God, and they're the best low-maintenance pets I've ever found in my life. If you can't afford a dog because of all the vet bills and all the craziness and how it doesn't let you travel because he's going to miss you, tarantulas are not like that. They love you no matter what. In fact, they kind of don't love you, but they're still fascinating and wonderful, and we love them. So tarantulas are awesome. Thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button. If you see Richard or Tarantula Cat out there in the wild, let them know. Richard, it's okay. Your beard will get better with time. And Tarantula Cat, some of us sit in chairs while we record our videos, and it's still okay. Thank you, Pat from Tarantula Heaven and Dr. Everhard for joining me on this video. Enjoy your Halloweens, folks, and maybe go learn to take care of a tarantula.